Hey, John says here, hey, Chargers are going to Charger. Note to Austin Eckler, remember the only way a Charger gets to wear a Super Bowl ring is with their new team. Ask Lance Allworth, Rodney Harrison, or Fred Dean.
Or Junior Seau. Yeah, and end result, the Chargers just don't have answers. And I will pose this question, and you can respond if you wish. And I happen to like this guy, but the scoreboard does not lie. Is Brandon Staley a qualified head NFL coach? He's a 500 coach now in his third plus year and has never won a playoff game. And we just saw that, what Miami did on Sunday.
Yeah, it was hilarious what happened. And for me, that have this mixed relationship with the Chargers, as they defected from San Diego, I'm not sure if I want to root for them or not, but I'm getting sucked back in. But now I'm getting all the frustration again. So it's nuts. Here, let's go to another comment here. This is from Steve. He goes, what happened to the Cincinnati Bengals?
Well, as we alluded to, the fact that Joe Burrow missed 5 weeks of camp because he injured a calf, I think the second day that camp had opened there in Ohio, they just were not in sync. I don't know whether he was tentative, moving the pocket, not wanting to run, etc. Was not accurate at all. I don't buy the theory, rain, gloves. He's played in all that types of weather. I just think that he's not 100%, or at least he was not dialed in, because as a team, they just did not seem razor sharp. It's like Kansas City. Chiefs did not seem razor sharp there. Burrow will get better, but that's a tough loss because it's within your division.
Yeah, and it's the rivalry game there in Ohio. And like I said, I was just thinking about the contract he signed, and then he just gets, he didn't even have 100 yards passing. Just incredible.
82 yards, all-time worst in his career in Cincinnati. 82 yards. On we go.
This is from Kenny. He says, when is Tom Telesco going to be held accountable?
Well, if you're going to hold the general manager accountable, please make sure you hold the president of football operations, John Spanos, accountable too. I think they're tied at the hip. If one goes, the other has to go. Oh, Dad, you're not going to fire your son, are you? That's a big issue. They're close. They are really close to being really good. But on the defensive side of the ball, they just don't look like they're a complete football team. And they're paying an enormous amount of money to Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and J.C. Jackson. And Jackson he's not the same player that he was in New England, and they're playing a very, very different defense. So I'm not going to fire Telesco. If they fire Telesco, then John Spano should resign too, because he's part and parcel, part of the decision-making process. But, they played as the season wore on last year. Their secondary got pretty good, and they force-fed a lot of young kids. But, boy, right now, that was a terrible performance against Miami.
Well, Telesco is the one that signed J.C. Jackson, right? So,
well, either Telesco or Spano, so they both signed off on it, yes.
Yeah. So who do you think's the bigger problem? The kids, Spanos, Telesco, or Staley?
I think it's the X and O's problem right now because they've built that roster. They've got a lot of really good athletes on that roster. And as much as we're sitting here and banging at this end of the table about the defense, at your end of the table, that offense is pretty good. And they acquired all those guys, and they drafted all those guys, and they've developed all those young guys. So it's too early to go looking for panic buttons, but that was a horrible performance. I'm sorry. They were chargering, and chargering does not have a good meaning in our community right now.
Not at all. Okay, let's move on here. Here we go. This is from II. He says, do you guys view Oregon State and Washington State moving to the Mountain West as a death sentence, like many fans of those schools have been saying? TCU, SMU, and Houston all managed to get back to the Power Five.
Well, they have. It's a big issue, but now there's very few openings available in the, quote, Power Five. Oregon State, Washington State are in a world of hurt because the Mountain West TV contract is $4 million per season. The old Pac-12 contract was $20 million per season. These are not rich money schools. They're two of the poorer schools in what was the old Pac-12. If they could get a court to rule that the $55 million in assets belongs to the Pac-12, and that money's not to be divvied up to the 8 that left.
Mm-hmm.
That's money that could be used to go to San Diego State, to go to Boise State, to go to Fresno, and to go to Air Force and help them buy their way out of the exit fee. Co-pay the $34 million exit fee. If you give each of those schools $17 million, Then you can bring the top 4 in the Mountain West. You could join those 2. Maybe you can find some others. I would assume you'd still be a, quote, Power 5 conference at that point in time, although it'd be a weaker Power 5 conference. You'd still be viewed as kind of being Mountain West 2.0, being a group of 5. But, I mean, I've talked to friends in Corvallis that work around Oregon State and people in Pullman that I know in Spokane, and they're really hurting. I mean, they're between a rock and a real hard place. For them to come down, it'd be great for Mountain West football.
No doubt.
No doubt. But for them financially, I think it'd be catastrophic. And I think emotionally, it would really be hard for Oregon State fan who viewed himself on the same plane as the Washington Huskies, Oregon Ducks, after viewing himself now to be on the same street corner with Boise State and San Diego State and Fresno State. But they got a year to figure this out, and that's why they filed a lawsuit on Friday.
Who makes the decision if a program is Power 5 worthy? Is it the NCAA? Is it some committee of people that vote, or is it TV networks?
It's your best friends of the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
That board of directors decides Power 5, group of 5. That board of directors right now is arguing, okay, we have 12 teams going next year to the expanded playoffs, but everything has changed. We might not have 5 conferences that we could choose from, the Power 5s. So how are we going to meter out the available slots for the at-large teams? Talk show host, we always need something to talk about. These guys are providing us something to talk about all the time.
Oregon State and Washington State might be able to finagle something, but in the end, the BCS might say, no, you guys are second tier now.
Concur. Even if they were to win the $55 million money that's in the bank account and get to spread that money around to help these Mountain West schools defect, buy them out, that's not a guarantee that the college football player system says, oh, new look, PAC6? Nah, you're not going to be Power 5. We move on here, a Monday bonus podcast. Everybody's got questions.
This is from Emmanuel. He says, Padres need to trade Soto and recoup talent, maybe trade for Trout?
Well, Trout's got a lot of miles on him. That's the only negative about Mike Trout. You know, he's not been able to stay healthy. And that's a lousy story in Anaheim now, with the Angels over the weekend, John, indicating if Mike Trout formally asks us to trade him, we'll do that. We'll try to put him in a position so he can go play for a winner as we begin our rebuild. Soto's situation, I don't think he's a $40 or $50 million a year player, but I'll tell you who does, Scott Boras. And I don't care about Boras's relationship with Peter Seidler, which has been pretty good, or the relationship with A.J. Preller. At the end of the day, are you going to pay him $40 to $50 million? Because he is surely not hit the way he hit in Washington. That was a 290 hitter with power. It's become a 260 hitter who walks a lot. And you're going to pay him $50 million? John?
What are your understanding of these reports that the Padres front office is not paying money and making investment in advanced scouting and analytics and all of those tools to make these guys successful? I mean, it seems crazy you would spend so much money on so many players, but then have them ill-equipped to win the game.
Well, I don't know that they've stopped spending money. I think they've still got a lot of boots on the ground. I think the analytics still play a key role. Now, they may make some changes as to who's drawing up the paperwork for the analytics and what type of data that they're presenting. But they made to me a surprising number of changes a year ago. Some of A.J. Preller's best people suddenly left, disappeared, reassigned, or went to work for other clubs. So maybe there's some changes there, but the analytics, I think, are still the analytics. I think the people that are processing the data, that might be different people that are going to be part of this mix.
Well, I think the fans' biggest gripe is that they signed Xander Bogaerts to an 11-year deal. We already had Tatis to play short. We already had Kim to play short. Why another shortstop? Throwing off the dynamic. I mean, do you like buyer's remorse maybe with Xander Bogaerts?
They'd never admit it. But 11-year contract for a guy whose stats had begun declining at Fenway Park? Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. As much as I think Tatis is a really good player, there was no need to give him a 14-year contract. Not at that point. He owned his rights for 6 years, arbitration eligible. You know, they gave him a contract, then he got hurt again, then he got suspended. There was no reason to be that impulsive at that point in time. And had they not done all that, had they never done Bogaerts' deal, 11 years, had they not done 14 for Tatis, that have this amount of money in the bank account to go get more players to put around these guys this year. So they got some real deep think stuff that's going to have to happen in the offseason. Okay, move on. A couple more here.
Okay, so speaking of getting players to put around them, let's go here to Angel. And he says, thought I would never say this, but the Lakers actually laid low this offseason. Got a great feeling about 2024.
Angel, I'll sign that memo. I think they won the offseason. Christian Wood is not a superstar center. He's more an offensive player than he is a defensive guy. But with what they got with Jackson, who came, and what they got last year with Vanderbilt, who came in the trade at the deadline, they do have a defensive presence in the paint when Christian Wood's not on the floor. So I think they've got every type of component they now need to make this thing cook. Now, granted, as John would say, LeBron's got to be on the floor for 65 games, and AD can't have a breakdown. He's got to be on the floor, and he's missed a lot of games over the course of his career. But I think now that you're correct, Angel, they've got a complement of different role players. And Austin Reeves is a star. I mean, he's a grinder, and he is a star in the making. And they found other guys now that can come off the bench and do certain types of things. So, here we go. We get the first November and the season actually starts. I think it's going to be fun to watch how quickly this comes together.
Well, last year, LeBron was good. I mean, he put up big numbers. And AD was kind of good and not good, but he was dealing with injuries. It was injuries. And the supporting cast last year was decent.
After the trade deadline.
You're right.
And now they've added Gabe Vincent, and they've added another big man, and they've added Reddish, who's a stroker. I like they've checked off a lot of boxes of a lot of role players who can do a lot of real different things. So only time will tell. Got to keep AD and LeBron on the floor. If they do that, I think they're going to be good. LeBron willed them into the playoffs. He carried them when AD was out for such an extended period of time. A couple more here.
This is a good one here. This is from Christopher. He says, Rancho Bernardo, show me your lightning bolt.
Yeah, Poway, quit pouting. That stuff just came off the top of my head when I was doing talk radio. I mean, I didn't format it all out. It just happened. And I go shopping at Vaughn's here in RB, and people just stand there, look at me, and they pull one of my phrases out of the air. Show me your lightning bolt. So it's great. It's great that we had such an impact on a lot of people.
You're an institution in San Diego.
Did you say I belong in an institution?
Yes, I think that's what I said. Yeah. Yes. Okay, let's get some social media comments in here. And here we go. Oh, yeah, talking about longtime listeners. This is from How Now the World. He says, Hacksaw, haven't heard you in at least 15 years. Used to listen to you on AM 570 here in Los Angeles before Joe Grande and Matt Money Smith took the helm. I'm so glad you're putting it down for the working man. Stay safe, brother.
It's cool. Good run. I was talking to somebody about sports talk radio and what we did. I mean, I did it here for 28 years. That's a long time. And I did it on just 2 stations. And I got bought out twice. And then obviously with all the mergers and everything, I had the chance to do it up in Los Angeles, which was really kind of cool because we were on the big signal that was Extra Sports 690. And then that whole structure changed. But so we impacted a lot of people, did it very differently. We were the first one through the wall to do it. And like I've told many people, and John and I have talked about this in the past, what we did at the original 690, we had no idea that we were building something iconic, but we just came up with an eclectic group of guys that all had it coming from a different angle. And we were able to keep it on the air for a long period of time before corporate management screwed it all up. But you look at the guys that we had together, and it really worked. We didn't all get along with each other, and there was a lot of infighting about space and ego and all that. But my goodness, we did some phenomenal things in sports talk radio, and we were the first one on the West Coast to do it.
Yeah, I mean, those were great times, especially in the 80s and 90s when you were in the build mode. I mean, it was just mind-blowing. And before the internet, we got so much sports content, especially from you. I mean, you blew me away with all the content and data that you provided.
The greatest thing I ever heard is Peter Seidler, who, of course, came from the O'Malley family that owned the Dodgers. And the first time I met Peter, he stopped me at Petco Park. He said, I listen to you all the time. He said, I had to make sure that I was on the 405 before 4 p.m. so I could get the best 15 minutes in sports radio while I was in gridlock.
Awesome.
That just kind of blew me away. Okay, a couple more here.
Okay, so let's talk here a little bit about the Dodgers. And this is from Ray, and he says, talking about Cody Bellinger. His 2020 season, he hit .239, which was before his injury. Why do Boris and others point that out? Also, in his 305 season, people forget that his second half, he hit less than .250. His decline actually started in the second half of the 2019 season.
Well, the agent will tell you only one thing about the viability of the client and the fact that the guy's hitting .319 with 34 home runs this year at Wrigley Field. And then Scott Boras just kind of said, well, maybe the Dodgers didn't handle the rehab from the shoulder surgery when my client was hitting 198 and 215. We talked last week extensively about that. He goes on the open market. It'll be fascinating to see what the Cubs are willing to pay, whether they think that they unlocked the mystery of Bellinger and Wrigley Field's confines might have had something to do with it, or whether this is a one-time aberration. I don't think Boris is going to get $30 million per year for this guy, but that's the rumor mill that he's going to ask. But that's the super agent doing what he does on behalf of his client. Will there be somebody out there that wants to give Cody Bellinger $30 million? Just like, is there somebody out there that would want to give Juan Soto $50 million, despite the fact he's hitting .260 and has more walks than home runs?
Bellinger is it was so weird how he was so great, then so terrible, and now really good again. So yeah, who knows? It's like Blake Snell. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. Concur with you wholeheartedly. One more.
Okay, we got one more. We got to talk about Coach Prime. And this is from Jeanette. And she says, Coach Prime did not run anyone off. They had 16 weeks to compete and demonstrate that they wanted to be on this team. Some did and some didn't. Some left before spring practice started. Others left after. Their choice for the most part. So please know what you're talking about before you speak.
I know what I'm talking about because he told players you won't be here. You're not going to be here for spring football. You can go to the transfer portal. I will continue to be defiant that I thought his misuse of the transfer portal was unfair to the players that he inherited. Now, that being said, his ability, and John's used the word magnet. I think it really is the correct term. His ability to sight, scope, and sign so many great skilled athletes is just phenomenal for the rebirth of Colorado Buffalo football. Now, that being said, he can't run off 50 more this year and get 50 more replacements coming in. There's a limitation as to how much you can do this, but he's got a lot of really good kids and they fly. He's got phenomenal cross-section of athletes, and what they've shown the first two games of the season, because the whole world has been paying attention, I got to believe that place is going to be a point of drawing really good players out of Texas and Florida, which is where you really need to recruit to fix your program. So Coach Prime doing well. I had the eeriest of thoughts. This is terrible to say, but I'm the first one to say it at this point in time. So he has a really good season at CU, or maybe two really good seasons at CU, and he goes home. Florida State. He loved Bobby Bowden. Obviously, Florida State's had some decent years and then some crummy years, and right now they're ranked top 5. Keep that in mind. There may be a day you wake up and say, Hacksaw, you told me so.
Yeah.
Coach Prime, Florida State Seminoles. Don't rule that out. Not tomorrow. Maybe a year from tomorrow, 2 years from tomorrow.
Well, he's a hot commodity. I mean, if he can flip a program from being a one-win team to knocking off the runner-up to the national championship and Nebraska with all that heritage, this is incredible. It was an interesting comment that one of the announcers made in the game, how like the Nebraska head coach is trying to rebuild the program from the inside out by building the lines first, where Dion was outside in. I want my skill guys first, because Dion was a skill guy.
Exactly. Shall be interesting to see. There's a lot of games still to be played. Colorado, Oregon, Washington, USC, Chip Kelly, mad scientist. And a year from now, that's Jim Harbaugh in Ann Arbor. Oh, by the way, that's the Horseshoe in Ohio State. So there's a lot of games to be played with big boy competition still to come. Hey, listen, we hope you have enjoyed our Monday bonus podcast